Imagine waking up one day and realizing that for 70 long years, your entire organization has been preparing people for the exact wrong kind of fight. Well, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a massive ground-up overhaul of one of the most rigid, tradition-bound institutions on the planet, the United States Air Force.
What happens when the world's most powerful Air Force suddenly realizes it's been training its recruits for the wrong kind of war? Seriously, think about that for a second. We're talking about a realization that triggered absolute panic, extreme urgency, and ultimately a complete transformation of basic military training.
The whole story actually starts with a really fundamental question from Major General Matthew Davidson. He's the commander of the 2nd Air Force. When he took command, he launched this deep dive investigation into basic military training, or BMT. He just wanted to know, simply, what the ultimate objective was. And, well, what he discovered was honestly kind of shocking. He found a massive void. The service didn't actually have clear objectives defining what kind of airmen they were fundamentally trying to produce. He pointed out that without a clear end state, they had essentially just been wandering their way through basic training.
Okay, so let's break this down using a really simple analogy. For decades, the Air Force was incredibly successful at producing the person you see on the left, the technician. This is the recruit who learns to perfectly tighten a bolt on a machine, but has absolutely no idea what that machine actually does. The new goal? Produce the person on the right, the warfighter. This is the recruit who tightens that exact same bolt, but does so with this profound understanding that the machine they're working on is a rocket ship going to the moon. They desperately needed to shift from creating these isolated technical experts to creating deeply connected warfighters. And here is the sheer gravity of the situation. For over 70 years, the basic training model stayed pretty much exactly the same. Sure, it successfully turned out highly disciplined recruits. It turned out technically capable people. But for 7 decades, those recruits didn't consistently understand their actual role in combat. They were operating in a silo. And that detachment? It wasn't just a tiny mistake anymore. It had become a massive, growing liability.
It created a literal identity crisis. General Davidson summed up the downstream effect of this perfectly. He said, "They left proud of what they did but unsatisfied with the thing that they joined." You see, that old, isolated technician mindset left young airmen completely disconnected from the actual identity of the Air Force. They felt more like regular employees just doing a job, rather than warriors contributing to a massive global defense mission.
Which brings us to Section 2, the looming near-peer threat.
So why the sudden urgency? Well, the modern war zone is changing incredibly fast due to near-peer competition, meaning adversaries who are technologically and militarily matched with the United States. Future combat environments are going to be highly contested. That old traditional assumption that you can just safely sit at a forward base while the pilots fly off to do all the fighting, yep, that's completely gone. If a base comes under attack, specialization alone just isn't going to cut it anymore. Every single person on that base, whether they're turning wrenches, cooking food, or managing computer networks, absolutely must understand their role as a warfighter. General Davidson delivered this chilling warning, and honestly, it's the absolute crux of this entire explainer. We have to prepare this airman for the wars they will fight, not the wars we have fought. This isn't just about updating some old textbook. This is literally an urgent matter of survival.
So, what's the solution? Let's get into the big reveal. The air-mindedness shift.
They're calling this new concept air-mindedness. Basically, this is a mindset built entirely around understanding the broader Air Force mission and taking real ownership of their role in generating and sustaining air power. It totally doesn't matter what your specific daily job is. If you understand exactly how your job connects to putting planes in the air and defending the skies, well, you walk a little taller. This is the exact concept that connects the bolt tightener to the rocket launch. To make this happen, they've completely restructured basic training into a brand new 4-layered model. Layer 1, core values. 2, military professionalism. 3, air-mindedness. And finally, Layer 4, specialty skills. Now, General Davidson pointed out that the first 2 layers were always there, and the 4th one always happens later at tech school. But that critical 3rd layer, air-mindedness, it was completely absent from how basic training was originally designed. Basic training was quite literally never designed to attach airmen to the actual Air Force mission. Crazy, right?
To fix this glaring issue, they actually had to change the physical environment of training itself. For generations, basic training was drill pad-centric, heavily focused on marching in perfect unison, folding t-shirts into absolute perfect squares, ceremony, all that stuff. But under this new BMT 3.0 model, they're shifting to an airfield-centric approach. Now, drill and ceremony aren't gone completely, but they're now just treated as tools for discipline, not the final, ultimate outcome. The final outcome has to be operational readiness.
So how are they practically doing this? Well, trainees are now getting early exposure to actual aircraft right from the jump. They're participating in simulated reconnaissance exercises, they're engaging directly with real-world operational scenarios, and General Davidson says because of this early hands-on mission exposure, these kids are lighting up. They are building their identity around the mission immediately, rather than having to wait months or years until they get to their first actual duty station.
But, as with any huge institutional change, there's Section 3, pushback from the ranks.
General Davidson fully acknowledges the massive wave of resistance to this change. He noted, and I quote, "People know what they went through, and they think that's what right looks like." It's a genuinely fascinating case study in organizational psychology. When a veteran goes through a grueling, highly specific type of training, they naturally view that exact crucible as the one and only valid way to forge a true service member.
This has sparked a really fiery debate within the military community. So on one side, you have the traditionalist view. They argue that basic training should be purely for discipline, breaking civilians down and building them back up, and that any job-specific or mission-specific knowledge belongs later in tech school. On the flip side, the reform review argues that modern warfare is just changing way too fast, that the old system leaves recruits totally unmotivated, and that instilling a mission identity from day one is literally the only way to build a modern warfighter.
To give you a real sense of what this debate sounds like, consider this perspective from an Air Force veteran who goes by the username T. Vining. They wrote, "BMT isn't tech school. Its job is to instill discipline, standards, honor, and accountability, the foundation every airman needs before learning their specialty." This perfectly encapsulates the argument that trying to teach air-mindedness and mission strategy too early might actually dilute the grueling, essential foundational discipline that basic training is supposed to provide.
But right alongside that, we have supportive perspectives, interestingly even from folks outside the Air Force. A veteran using the handle Willie, who identifies as an Army grunt, wrote, "Warfare is changing. We need to change and adapt, make it meaningful to mission." This side of the aisle argues that modernization isn't just some corporate buzzword. It's a terrifying necessity for survival on the modern battlefield.
All right, let's wrap this up with our final section, the ultimate litmus test.
So, who's actually right here? Well, the Air Force has clearly made its decision, and they are rolling this out on a scale that is just hard to comprehend. Over the next 3 years alone, 1/3 of the entire United States Air Force is going to experience this new BMT 3.0 model. Let that sink in. This isn't some small pilot program. This is a total, ground-up reshaping of the force. Tens of thousands of new airmen will enter the service completely stripped of that old technician mindset, and instead fully steeped in this new air-mindedness.
Which brings us to the ultimate litmus test. General Davidson says success ultimately comes down to one simple moment. When a newly graduated trainee is asked what they actually learned in basic training, will they just say they learned how to march and fold shirts? Or, as the general hopes, will they be able to clearly and confidently explain why the Air Force will never be defeated as long as the United States Air Force is in the fight? Can you truly manufacture a warrior's mindset in a classroom and on an airfield, or is that something that can only be forged in the fires of discipline and experience? Lots to think about there. Thank you so much for joining me to explore this incredible transformation.